Whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house.
Hey folks, did you know that you can't be conservative in Hollywood? I mean, it's not true. I mean, Kelsey Grammer's been pretty open about being a conservative for years, and he's had regular roles playing Sideshow Bob in The Simpsons, and Beast in the Marvel movies, and Frasier Crane on Frasier. He still gets to play all those iconic roles, despite appearing in such conservative slop as An American Carol alongside noted sex pest Bill O'Reilly. He also appears in a lot of weird small films like Money Plane.
Whatever you want to wager on, the Money Plane has you covered. You want to bet on a dude fucking an alligator. Money Plane.
Okay, so maybe I should rephrase my opening question here. Let me phrase it this way. Do you believe that Hollywood won't make conservative movies? I mean, they kind of do with movies like A Working Man, and if the answer is yes, then you might be dumb enough to subscribe to Daily Wire Plus. That's right, the Daily Wire is more than just a conservative news propaganda arm that tells their audience to harass hospitals that offer transgender health services. They're also in the business of movies and TV now to compete with places like Disney Plus and Netflix. So in addition to listening to Matt Walsh bitch about having to bring his kids to a Sonic movie,
okay, if a kid's movie or kid's show is so grating and so dumb and so unpleasant that parents can't stand to be in the same room while it's on, that doesn't mean it's for kids.
And Ben Shapiro showcasing how little he knows about female anatomy.
Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet-ass P-word. Give me everything you got for this wet-ass P-word.
You can also watch original Daily Wire movies and TV shows. Well, I mean, not all of it is original. In fact, the first few films on the service were productions that were already completed that they just purchased. That's why the story of Daily Wire Plus doesn't start with the Daily Wire, but with a little studio called Cinestate, and holy shit, are they terrible. Part 1, Sins of the Cinestate. During the 2010s, Dallas Saunier emerged as a rising filmmaking talent in the industry. He moved from Texas to California and would start out as a producer and executive producer on a number of mostly forgettable Steve Austin action movies, but eventually he would land the larger picture of Bone Tomahawk, a gritty mixture of Western and horror that attracted the likes of Kurt Russell and Richard Jenkins. He released the film from his own studio, Caliber Media. Soon after that film debuted, he moved back to Texas in 2016 to turn Caliber Media into Cinestate, a local studio that would aim to make movies specifically in the Lone Star State and free of Hollywood scruples. It sounded like an inspiring story of one producer trying to rise up by forming his own studio to challenge bigger ones. Unfortunately, it's a story with a dark turn, because despite all the local pride that Cinestate took in being a homebrewed Texas studio created by a local producer, it would end up making huge mistakes that led to hideous scandals. Before all the controversy arose, however, Cinestate was actually doing rather well as a studio, at least from the perceptions of the public that was unaware of what was going on behind the scenes. The studio released such gritty and violent films as Brawl in Cell Block 99 and Dragged Across Concrete. Now, none of these films were huge box office successes, but they were films that people were interested in. They featured such notable actors as Vince Vaughn and Mel Gibson, and they actually got a fair amount of positive critical praise. I mean, it's hard not to be a little impressed that there's a film with Vince Vaughn where he smashes someone's skull into concrete and just drags their crushed face across the concrete. And to be clear, this actually happens in the film Brawl in Cell Block 99 and not Dragged Across Concrete. Just want to make that clear. The studio even acquired the movie journalist website Birth Movies Death, but by far one of the best things that Cinestate ever did was revive Fangoria. The horror magazine stopped publication in 2017 as it had been struggling to stay afloat, but in 2018, Cinestate purchased Fangoria and relaunched the magazine that same year. Everything seemed to be going well for Cinestate. They were making movies that people were paying attention to, and they were helping out by making sure that movie journalist websites and publications were staying afloat. Everything seemed to be going really good for the studio. And then it didn't. The fall of Cinestate began in March of 2020 when Cinestate line producer Adam Donaghy was accused of raping a 16-year-old girl. This happened during the production of the movie A Ghost Story. He would soon be arrested on these charges when audio evidence surfaced of him soliciting sex from his crew. This wasn't just an isolated incident, as it's been reported that Donaghy was barred from theaters for getting into drunken fights with women. So for all of this, he's pretty much the Harvey Weinstein of indie cinema. Donaghy's behavior was downplayed by Cinestate, and more specifically Dallas Saunier. Saunier tried to distance himself from Donaghy, acting as though he were shocked to hear this news, but he couldn't quite hide being complicit in covering up such scandals. Because soon after this, more allegations came out from others who had been sexually harassed while working for Cinestate. Probably one of the most damning was that veteran actor Fred Williamson had been groping members of the hair and makeup department while they were working on the film VFW. Those who were groped told Dallas about this, and his response was that the crew should just look out for each other because Williamson was too expensive to fire. Jessica Schmidt was working in costumes on VFW, and she experienced this offense and described her experience like this. Quote, "So it's like you're standing in front of a sexual predator and you are telling us to use the buddy system?" When most of this information was revealed in an article by the Daily Beast, Saunier had two responses to these allegations. The first was a kinda sorta apology where he stated that he was going to make his set safer as he wasn't as experienced in this area of film production. But he also stated that these allegations were not true and that they had never been informed about these issues. And he went on to remark that this is all just a plot to take down his studio. Quote, "The less than a handful of crew members who have personal vendettas against us right now, they're frustrated because we told them that they weren't doing a good job, or we have moved on and started working with stronger talents in those positions." Filmmaker Adam Diedrich, who worked on multiple projects for Cinestate, spoke of how this is a real problem within the indie cinema scene with regards to sexual abuse. Quote, "I didn't experience that directly, but I'm recognizing that there are some systemic abuses in place within our industry, especially the independent film industry and maybe specifically in Texas. We've been taught that we have to either do X or find a new job. And doing X apparently meant 27-hour shoots and ignoring sexual abuse. And since there wasn't exactly a lot of local film work in Texas, it was either put up with such a toxic work environment or don't work at all. With things not looking good, Cinestate essentially went dark as the hideous nature of what went on behind the scenes spewed forth. Birth Movie's death had to shut its doors as a result, but don't worry about Fangoria though. They were thankfully bought up by a different company, and they continue to push out new issues to this day. So, after all that, Dallas Saunier still wanted to make films even after being called out for being a massive piece of shit. He rebranded Cinestate as Bonfire Legend, so nobody would recognize them as the studio that endorses rapists, and chose their exclusive distributor to be The Daily Wire, a safe haven for failures. And yes, in case you're wondering, the Daily Wire did know about the scandals that were going on with Cinestate. And they didn't care. On January 14th, 2021, the Daily Wire released a Cinestate film that had been waiting for a commercial debut, that film being Run, Hide, Fight. It's essentially a high school revenge fantasy where Zoe, a teenager trained in using guns and getting over the death of her mom, decides to take out some school shooters that are rampaging her school. The way that the Daily Wire and its figurehead Ben Shapiro promoted the film makes it sound like Ben was behind making this film possible. This is not true. Run, Hide, Fight was made well before Cinestate turned into a studio so publicly toxic that they had to resort to seeking a conservative news organization as its distributor. Kristen Leah Haynes, the film's second assistant director, spoke ill of what happened to the film, stating, "Is there a way to remove your name from a crew list? I've never wanted to take my name off a project more." Makeup artist Madeline Rose spoke of her reluctance to work on the film given the allegations of Donaghy, who is also working on the movie. The breaking point for her was when she heard that the crew had killed a deer for the film, which was a violation of a number of film and hunting regulations. From Madeline, quote, "They hired a local hunter, went on his land, and filmed the deer being shot. Then they took the deer and froze it so they could pull it out again for close-ups with the actual actors." Now, when Madeline brought up these concerns, she was basically yelled at by Donaghy and was told that she was either with them or against them. She quit the next day. Furthermore, Run, Hide, Fight was not shunned by the film community just because it had an association with the Daily Wire. It debuted at the Venice Film Festival in September 2020, and the reaction was still largely negative. Some thought the film was meh as a revenge fantasy, while others just thought the film was a mess of being a pointless exercise in Death Wish-style entertainment. To give more of my personal opinion, I managed to watch the film amid its free YouTube debut, and even if you divorce the politics of the film, it's still not good. Now, aside from the lead girl of Zoe having a bit of a backstory, nobody has a personality in this film. The villains are just cartoonish bad guys who love chaos for the thrill of it all, and because they were apparently bullied, though the details of what led down this road are never fully divulged. The victims are also all random students we never really get to know that well. It's very much a mindless action picture in this regard. This seems to be by design, where Shapiro thinks that the film is really strong for never giving the bad guys motivations and just makes them bad guys because they're bad guys. No observations on real-world school shootings, please. The Daily Wire's Matt Walsh actually said that this film is great escapism. Yeah, because I can't think of anything more escapist in my movies than school shootings. But I guess the film kind of fits this escapist level, considering it never really questions anything cultural that led up to the shooting. Like, don't think about any of that, just enjoy your die-hard action movie set in a high school where the teen who is skilled in handling guns can save the day. Now, a lot of people have described Run, Hide, Fight as die-hard in a high school, and I'm sorry, but I take great issue with that descriptor. So many people like to use this descriptor whenever there's an action film taking place entirely within an enclosed space, referring to the setting of the first Die Hard film taking place almost entirely inside Nakatomi Plaza. The thing is, Die Hard wasn't notable just because of this aspect. So many films with a similar setting often get compared to Die Hard when thematically and structurally, they're nowhere close to being a Die Hard film. I mean, even Die Hard films just stopped being Die Hard films. Some of them actually ended up being commercials. The original Die Hard holds up because it has solid arcs for all the characters. We know who John McClane is as a character. We know his quirks, his worldview perspective, his working class attitude, and we see him as mortal for the way that he becomes more wounded and bloody as the film goes on, and not just charging through without a scratch on him. There are stakes to his character. He's not an unstoppable killing machine. Like, if he steps on glass, his feet bleed, and that's actually one of the highlights of the film, is that you see like this action hero get all beat up and bloodied and bruised. We also know a lot more about the villain Hans Gruber. We know how he behaves, we know how he plans to take over Nakatomi Plaza, and we know what his demands are in this situation. He's an interesting villain because of both his cold nature and the intricate means of targeting a corporation for his own gain. Run, Hide, Fight has none of this depth. Zoe has pathos, sure, but never goes through much of a change. By the end of the film, all that's accomplished is that she confesses her love for another student almost inexplicably and reconnects with her father. She's also perfectly fine by the end of the film, both physically and emotionally, and she's stable enough that she's willing to hunt down the final shooter when he is out of the school. She never questions the horrific events that transpired, she just relishes in that sweet revenge of having another student bleed out. The lead villain of Tristan also isn't interesting because he openly admits that he's only doing all this for the mayhem. He has no demands and no plans past just shooting up the school. There's no observation of the influences that led to this point either because, hey, it's escapism. Stop demanding that your characters have reasons for doing things. And as I said before, all the victims and supporting villains are just a whole lot of nothing. We never learn much of anything about them, making it all the harder to care about anybody in this story. But if I had to say something nice about this film, I guess it's kind of decent for mindless entertainment in a sort of overblown, exploitive, canon film sort of way. But it doesn't really hold up if the goal of pushing this film on the Daily Wire is to make a case for movies that have more conservative values. It's not that it doesn't hit the conservative check marks of what that particular audience likes to see. It absolutely meets that criteria as proven by the number of online reviews, but this film has about as much to say on gun violence as the 2018 remake of Death Wish, so not a lot. The two films even have the same ending, where the good guy with the gun kills the bad guys with guns, and everybody lives happily ever after, never questioning how such violence arose in the first place. You know, if the NRA still had their streaming TV service, I can guarantee you they would have bought this film. But this wasn't exactly a Daily Wire movie, so much as it was a movie that the Daily Wire bought. They purchased a few other films, but it was when Daily Wire started producing their own films and TV shows that it truly reflected their conservative brand of entertainment. Because, let's be real here, you didn't click on this video to see reviews of their middling acquisitions of such films as Shut-In and The Hyperions. You want to see the real Daily Wire originals that represent the full weight of this company comprised of failed actors and screenwriters. So let's just get right into the good stuff, or the bad stuff, depending on your perspective. Or I guess maybe gross stuff? Part 2, Daily Wire Movies and Television. Movies and TV shows weren't just going to be a little side project for the Daily Wire. It's not like it was going to be one of their shitty white label schemes with their shaving razors and chocolate bars. They were going to spend a significant amount of money to become the next Disney Plus, considering they viewed that streaming service as their biggest competitor. The first film that could be considered a true Daily Wire production was the 2022 documentary, What is a Woman? The film features Daily Wire commentator Matt Walsh interviewing various people trying to figure out what is the definition of the word woman. Matt tries to trip up people by asking those who believe in trans rights if they can define what a woman is. The question itself is not an easy one, and when Matt finally does get a thoughtful answer from somebody who studies gender, the film deceptively edits the long explanation into sounding boring. Like, here's somebody who has the nuanced answer that Matt was looking for, and he just doesn't care. He just edits around the talk of $5 words he doesn't understand to make it seem like Matt is right to be bored with the topic instead of, looking like he's out of his depth. What is a Woman is not a very inquisitive film considering the very small lens that the Daily Wire has regarding gender. The film ends with Matt delivering his answer, or rather, his wife's answer. When asking the film's central question, Matt's wife says that a woman is defined as, quote, an adult human female. But that is less of an answer and more of a circular fallacy. The answer then begs the question, what is considered female? I imagine that if Matt were posed this question, he would say that a female is a woman, and this isn't an answer. It's a synonym. However, the Daily Wire's audience prefers that anti-trans content, so this film ultimately became the most popular picture on the streaming service. But lest you think the Daily Wire is only going to be making right-wing propaganda like this, they did try that same year to make a genre film. Because the next film for the Daily Wire was Terror on the Prairie, a Western action film. The film is notable for starring Gina Carano, who previously had a regular role in Star Wars The Mandalorian. The key word is had because she was fired. In 2021, Carano compared being conservative in America as equal to that of the Jews being persecuted during the Holocaust. Coupled with her social media post about being anti-mask, anti-trans, and whining about voter fraud, Gina was fired by Lucasfilm and dropped by her agency. But Gina didn't seem to care. She could just go over to the Daily Wire and they'd give her a movie deal. Well, once they could find a deal for her. You see, Carano was originally supposed to star in a film called White Knuckle, a revenge picture where she hunts down a serial killer. But apparently the COVID-19 shooting requirements had stifled production, especially since Carano didn't want to comply with the mask requirements. Instead, her first movie would be Terror on the Prairie, a Western shot in Montana. The reason for this change has been stated because of the lax COVID-19 restrictions in Montana, though it's hard to verify if that was truly the case here. Terror on the Prairie takes place in the 19th century and mostly follows the character of Hattie, played by Carano. She's the wife of a Confederate soldier that becomes the target of some nasty men who are angered that her husband betrayed them. She'll soon have to defend her home from these nasty men that are targeting her family, which doesn't seem to be a huge departure for this character. I mean, it's not a departure for Carano, she's used to action scenes, but the character she plays just feels dull and lifeless, built explicitly for shooting guns and punching people and little else. But this was a big deal for the Daily Wire. I mean, they had stolen away an actress from Disney who was an outspoken and gross conservative, but when Gina was interviewed at the movie's premiere, her answer for why she chose the Daily Wire seemed less out of preference and more out of desperation.
Why was it so important for you to work with the Daily Wire? I'm sure you had tons of people knocking down your door. Why did you pick the Daily Wire?
Well, they're There was a big, massive company that fired me.
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
Oh, it was a big deal. They didn't want to work with me, which made the rest of the industry not want to work with me. And then all of a sudden, Daily Wire popped up, and they were like, "We want to work with you." And I was like, "Wow, I want to work with you too." And that's basically how it happened.
Wow, that's really not a ringing endorsement for the Daily Wire. It's really weird that the Daily Wire thought this would be a good interview question. Also, why is Rob Schneider being interviewed? He's not in the movie. Jesus Christ, it's like Pariah Fest at this premiere. Terror on the Prairie sucked, even by the standards of the Daily Wire. The Rotten Tomatoes audience score, which usually gets high marks from the Daily Wire's devoted fan base, didn't hit that same level this time. It also sounds like the film didn't draw much attention. I mean, I don't know why. The film stars Gina Carano, the actress fired from Disney, which the trailers keep boasting about. After the failure of Terror on the Prairie, the Daily Wire went dormant with their film production for a while. Over a year had passed and we didn't see much from them. But that's understandable, right? I mean, film and television production takes a lot of time to do right, and this is a new endeavor for this type of company. It'd be a smart move to take their time and craft a film that fits the mold that they were going for. After all, CEO Jeremy Boring and co-founder Ben Shapiro have stressed that the films being made at the Daily Wire wouldn't be overtly political. The films they'd be making would be about genuine entertainment and not trying to force a political message. Their overall goal was to produce good old-fashioned mainstream entertainment that would appeal to a wide array of audiences. But then they said fuck all that and made Lady Ballers. Lady Ballers is exactly the type of trash you'd expect these right-wing dorks to make. The premise involves an all-male basketball team switching genders so that they can play in the WNBA. It's basically Juana Man with more anti-trans jokes, cringeworthy cameos by people like Ted Cruz, and an in-movie commercial advertising the Daily Wire's shitty white label products. The only funny thing about Lady Ballers is the story of its pre-production. Originally, this film was supposed to be a documentary similar to What is a Woman? The Daily Wire team wanted to infiltrate women's leagues, with men trying to identify as women to prove how trans people shouldn't compete in sports. You know, like that episode South Park made about something that definitely probably happened in the nightmares of a conservative. I hate that episode so fucking much for its thesis about how you shouldn't feel uncomfortable when discussing trans women in sports. I assure you, South Park creators, there are plenty of people not afraid to talk about this matter for fear of being transphobic. Some of them make an entire living not shutting the fuck up about it. You know, like the Daily Wire and J.K. Rowling. The problem with this documentary was that the standards for women's sports were not as low as the Daily Wire thought. Getting into a women's league was not as simple as just identifying as a woman. And this is by Ben Shapiro's own admission. I mean, wow, it really makes your documentary premise seem like shit when your general thesis falls apart at a foundational level. Another problem was that the Daily Wire couldn't find any male athletes willing to fulfill the requirements for passing as trans women to compete in sports, likely because it might have involved more than just wearing a dress and a wig. And could you blame them? I mean, could you imagine setting your entire career on fire because you switched your gender and deceived people for the sake of a shitty conservative documentary? Could you imagine if those men went the whole 9 yards with transitioning all for a joke on women's leagues? Like, if you did that, nobody would ever take you seriously again. Even the extras for the crowd scenes in Lady Ballers ended up walking off set when they found out that they'd been roped into a transphobic movie. Your films are so fucking bad that the extras are walking off set? And just think about how bad this makes the Daily Wire look. I mean, they wanted to make an anti-trans documentary with a thesis that was proven false on a conceptual level that nobody wanted to help with. The Daily Wire's anti-trans beliefs are so hilariously manufactured that they had to make up a fictional film in order to seem correct. And sure, Lady Ballers is a comedy, but a comedy they want you to believe carries some truth to it. They want their conservative audience to think that men passively posing as women, easily getting into women's sports is a real problem. And it's not a problem. It really isn't. You already proved it wasn't by trying to stage your point in reality for a documentary and failing at it. The writing also reveals just how poor conservative comedy can be. The premise is that Jeremy Boring plays a loser coach trying to find some way to prove himself as more than just a divorced dad. He thinks it'll be easier to get into the WNBA if he dresses up some male athletes as women and then dominates the women easily, because men are inherently stronger than women. this film argues. One of the early gags in the movie is that nobody really pays attention to the WNBA, and this joke reveals two things about the Daily Wire. First, they don't live in reality. There has been an increase in WNBA attendance, and second, they don't really give a shit about women's sports. If you were really that concerned about trans people having an unfair advantage in women's sports, you would not be joking that it's a sport that nobody watches. If that's your stance, then it really makes it seem as though you only paid attention to sports when you could use it as an excuse to be grossly transphobic. Lady Ballers is a comedy that will only appeal to right-wingers so entrenched in Daily Wire propaganda, considering that the film is loaded with Daily Wire in-jokes and product placement that only the devout will understand, let alone find funny. The trailer for the film, released only a week before its debut, was advertised with the tagline of being the most triggering comedy. But was it though? Was it really? Because to rile up people to be offended by that film, you'd actually have to gain their attention, and there's not a lot of mainstream eyeballs that are going to be attracted to subscribing to Daily Wire Plus. There was no massive swelling of audiences who were triggered or appalled by your edgy comedy because most people not deep in Daily Wire muck even knew that your movie existed. There are only two types of people who are going to watch this film. It's either the right-wing dorks who will literally buy anything that the Daily Wire is selling, or left-wing influencers keeping tabs on right-wing outlets. No fence-sitters, centrists, or so-called apolitical folks will watch this movie unless they are somehow coaxed into paying for Daily Wire Plus, and you can barely convince people to subscribe to Netflix or Disney Plus with all that they offer. Does the Daily Wire really expect those same people to pay the same amount for a microscopic amount of media by comparison? The Lady Ballers film is trash, especially with how hard it tries to crowbar in conservative comedy, barfing out more buzzwords than clever jokes. But what's so strange about this movie is how it tries to frame its characters that are almost sympathetic. The character of Alex spends so much time playing basketball as a woman that he starts to think that he might really be a woman. And this monologue isn't played up as a joke. It's the most genuine display of emotion in this entire film. So how does Boring's character of the coach convince Alex that he's not trans? Well, he attacks him and tells him to stop it. Like, how did you fuck up your film this bad, Jeremy Boring? Why'd you make me feel sorry for a character who needed real help with coming to terms with their gender? Why did you stage it in a way that makes you look like the villain? I mean, you wrote and directed this shit. How are you so bad at making convincing propaganda? So why did the Daily Wire go back on its word about making mainstream movies and just ended up making conservative slop? Well, the Daily Wire must rely on provocation to be relevant because apolitical media doesn't pay the bills. They tried developing comparatively innocuous productions that might appeal to the centrist crowd like Run, Hide, Fight and Terror on the Prairie, and nobody cared. And that's how we ended up getting more conservative slop like Mr. Birchum. Mr. Birchum is Daily Wire's terrible attempt to venture into the world of adult animation. Now, unlike the previous productions at the Daily Wire, this TV show actually has a history of trying to develop its central character. The show was created by comedian Adam Carolla, who had been perfecting the character of Mr. Birchum for years prior. He initially conceived of him on the radio as a blowhard repairman. Carolla kept working on Birchum in a few TV sketch shows like The Man Show and Crank Yankers, where he came to define him more as a woodshop teacher. Finally, Adam Carolla was ready to take the next step and get Mr. Birchum his own animated show. He developed a pilot in the early 2010s that would be marketed to Fox. The premise for the cartoon involved Mr. Birchum working as a woodshop teacher and being frustrated with the world around him. With King of the Hill having recently ended on Fox, it was the ideal time for Mr. Birchum to swoop in as the next satirical cartoon about a guy who loves tools. Unfortunately, Fox didn't end up picking up the show after they watched the pilot. Now, the way that the Daily Wire and Adam Carolla might spin this was that the show is just too politically incorrect for network television. I think they need you to believe that the show was too conservative for network television, and only Daily Wire Plus had the politically incorrect cojones to greenlight a complete season for Mr. Birchum. However, the TV pilot has been leaked online, and it's just boring. The jokes are not all strictly conservative in affirmation, considering that Birchum's whining about peanut allergies and history is often countered in his classroom setting. And this is not the least bit offensive. It's just It's just dull and honestly kind of pathetic in how it frames Mr. Birchum. The pilot ends with Birchum having been humiliated in school for his pissing and moaning, just sitting alone, eating a candy bar not permitted on the grounds, while listening to Freebird. And like, are we supposed to feel bad for Mr. Birchum here? Are we supposed to laugh at him? I mean, hard to say, but this episode really frames Birchum as miserable. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the real reason that Fox didn't buy this show for a full season was not because it was offensive or conservative, but because it just wasn't funny or interesting. Now compare Mr. Birchum to how Hank Hill is framed in the first episode of King of the Hill. Hank is frustrated with the world and clearly has anger issues with his old-fashioned values being tested in the modern world, but by the episode's end, he reconnects with his son and admits that he loves Bobby in his own special way. The framing of Hank makes him unique. Like, sure, he'll say stupid things and he has backwards views, but he means well and he is capable of growth and he loves his family, and that makes him a more enduring character than a mere satire of the typical Texan dad. There is none of that heart or growth in Mr. Birchum, the pilot. And as for Mr. Birchum, the Daily Wire Plus animated series, well, that somehow ends up being worse. This version of Mr. Birchum is far less likable than the pilot character. Pilot Birchum was at least grounded enough to be believable as an aggravated conservative teacher who groans and complains about the world, but is still proven wrong. Daily Wire Mr. Birchum is meaner, louder, less funny, and always proven right. There is no growth of the character. There are no funny jokes for his teaching job. There is no clever political commentary that doesn't feel like it was painfully crowbarred into the script. And the animation just gets progressively worse as the series continues. The show is just unwatchable, as if it were produced by a divorced conservative dad who just doesn't know anything about making cartoons, but wants a cartoon where he's the hero. It doesn't matter if it's nowhere near as funny or human as cartoon sitcoms like The Simpsons or King of the Hill or Bob's Burgers. This one is for the deadbeat dads. Only they will appreciate a show with such storylines as tools that are operated through wokeness and bitching about construction charities and forcing your students to do your household construction projects without the consent of their parents? Sure, that's not creepy. That's not the sign of a bad teacher. This is a funny show.
Laugh, damn it. Divorced daddies really need a win right now.
This was the pathetic route the Daily Wire Plus was going down. They've long since abandoned the idea of being a mainstream studio meant to appeal as counter-programming for regular folks. Now it's all just strictly conservative entertainment now. It's movies and television made for conservatives by conservatives, and enjoyable by nobody else but conservatives. So they made another Matt Walsh documentary called Am I Racist? The film tackles the movement of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that might not be effective in their aims. Matt Walsh, however, is incapable of delving into this topic. He's established as someone who is cautious about ordering black coffee from a black server because he thinks it might be interpreted as racist. It's not, Matt. You're just fucking weird about this. And probably racist. You're also not that bright about history because you say that there weren't any racial issues in the 1990s, and I'm going to assume that, Matt had like an isolated childhood and just didn't know about the Rodney King riots and the O.J. Simpson trial, which really did turn up the heat on racism and race relations during that decade. Matt's just not smart enough to dig into that history of race, let alone the neoliberal flaws of treating DEI as an industry. He's also not good at disguises. The joke of this film is that Matt is going undercover as a white man with white guilt. He doesn't change much of anything with him, really. He has different clothes and different hair, but that's about it. He doesn't even put on a different voice because, let's be honest, he's not as versatile of an actor as he thinks he is. Now, if you're familiar with Matt Walsh, you never once feel like you're looking at a character here. The costume is so ineffective at covering up Matt's identity that when he tried it out at the DNC, everybody spotted him instantly. People familiar with the Daily Wire weren't thinking, hey, what's this weird guy who kinda looks like Matt Walsh? What's he doing here? No, they were thinking, okay, what is Matt Walsh doing here? Matt's adoption of a white liberal character is terrible, especially when you make the obvious comparison to Borat. The satirical reporter of Borat took far more effort to compose than Matt's lazy attempt at satire. Sacha Baron Cohen designed Borat as a very distinct character with his own dress, personality, and backstory. In the opening of his 2006 film, Borat's established as a fully realized person with ridiculous beliefs and goals of fame and fucking. All of those details make Borat real enough to become an infiltrator of unsuspecting individuals. Moreover, Borat's favoring of dated concepts on women, homosexuality, and Jews can be used as bait for luring out bigots to be more earnestly grotesque in front of a camera. Matt Walsh has not created a clever character with Am I Racist? He's basically constructed a clown that can only perform at conservative birthday parties with conservative humor. Borat was able to aggravate and poke at the rich folks of a dinner party through a combination of ableist and sexist language, with the capper of bringing poop and a prostitute to the dinner. When Matt Walsh tries something similar at a DEI dinner event, all he can do with his character is drop plates and mildly annoy the guests. You're not good at pulling pranks if the people you're trying to prank directly ask you if you're an actor putting on a bit. Even Matt's more involved jokes are just in poor taste, and not in like a clever way. Like, one of his bits is trying to convince people that the Washington Monument should be restructured into a tribute to George Floyd by painting it black and extending the height. Get it? Because black people have big dicks. Because you see the joke here is that George Floyd was killed by police brutality, and that, you know, we should pay tribute to him with this stereotype about black dicks. This is conservative comedy.
Please laugh.
The film Am I Racist is not that much divergent from What is a Woman. Like, it has a lot of the same tactics. It's deceptively edited. They lied to the people who were being interviewed. And Matt's thesis about how his uncle's racist jokes are really not that bad is proven right in the end. Unlike the other Daily Wire films, though, Am I Racist actually had a bit of a wider theatrical release. And because of this theatrical release, Am I Racist actually did make a little bit of a profit and was taken notice of by a few more critics. The weird thing about the positive praise for this film, though, is that a lot of it requires you to be willfully ignorant of Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire, and this is pretty much proven with Jeremy John's review.
Now, unlike What is a Woman, which was on, I believe it was Daily Wire Plus, I believe that's their streaming service, I was like, I'm not signing up for another streaming service. No, I got enough.
Hey, Jeremy, maybe you should actually look up why people don't like the Daily Wire. Maybe you look up that time they were instigated in the bomb threats of children's hospitals for offering support for trans youth. You know, that gross thing they did. Twice. In 1 year.
I imagine people that are in the movie will start coming out being like, yeah, that was edited one way to make it look worse than it actually was. One of the authors in the movie that he was interviewing has actually already made a statement. I didn't read the statement, but I just know she made one.
Hey, Jeremy, maybe you should actually read that statement. Maybe you should actually, read up on why people were lied to and how they got that footage.
Matt Walsh plays Matt Walsh, who's on a DEI quest to decenter his whiteness. DEI being diversity, equity, and inclusion? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yeah, I googled it, sue me.
Hey, Jeremy, maybe do basic fucking research on the shit you think is funny. The only funny thing about Am I Racist was that the Daily Wire tried to give this film a for-your consideration campaign. Okay, so part of the for-your consideration campaigns is that they come advertised with pull quotes from other critics. Am I Racist also has some pull quotes in the emailed campaign, but only from specific folks like Film Threat, run by Chris Gore, a critic turned anti-woke grifter, and Joe Rogan of Joe Rogan Says Dumb Shit fame. The Daily Wire and its sycophants also kept boasting that Am I Racist was the top-performing documentary of 2024. And you know what? Credit where it's due. They really were, the most profitable documentary of that year. So congratulations, Daily Wire. You beat out the stiff competition of No Other Land and Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. Take that, film about Israeli-Palestinian conflict and a movie about the United Nations screwing over the Democratic Republic of Congo. You might have gotten Oscar nominations, but Am I Racist made a cool $12 million, which is the only metric used for judging a documentary's worth, apparently.
Money plane.
Daily Wire Plus also lined up a few more productions. There's the Pendragon cycle, based on some fantasy books, which Jeremy Boring really seems to want to develop into a TV series. And the production footage looks massive, but I doubt the right-wing crowd is going to have much interest in this show. They're also working on an adaptation of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, which just sounds like the worst idea. Like, did you all see that movie trilogy that was attempted with the book? It was so bad that the budget kept getting cut in half with each entry in that saga, and they even had to recast the actors with each sequel. And like, nobody went to see these films in the theater. Like, collectively, they didn't even make $10 million. What makes the Daily Wire think that they'll get this adaptation right, or that anyone will even be that interested? It's an adaptation that just sounds like a recipe for bleeding money. Okay, but this is all just media for adults, and the Daily Wire has made it pretty clear that their biggest target is Disney+. And the bare minimum for competing with Disney is that you need media for kids and family. And eventually, Daily Wire invested extra effort in that department. And it didn't go well. Part 3, Bentkey. Bentkey is an additional streaming service of Daily Wire Plus, built exclusively for kids and families. To Daily Wire's credit, the programming on this service did live up to the company's aspirations of not being overly political, which is another way of saying that it was dull and few people paid attention to it. Bentkey's flagship cartoon was Chipchilla, a cartoon about a family of chinchillas living in suburbia. The most notable aspect of this cartoon, aside from featuring the voice of washed-up comedian Rob Schneider, was that it garnered a controversial comparison to the popular cartoon Bluey. It's easy to see the comparison for Chipchilla having a similar family setting. It'd also be easy to spin a rumor that the Daily Wire was trying to make their own right-wing knockoff version of Bluey. Because, oh, how I wish that were true. Because the truth is, Chipchilla is not overtly political, overtly conservative, or overtly anything. It's just boring. It doesn't have the cute charm of Bluey, nor does it have the absurd conservative lessons of something like the Tuttle Twins. And if the Daily Wire were truly aiming for something more apolitical, they came closest with Chipchilla. There's not much conservative messaging in this cartoon at all. There's also not much entertainment either. If we are comparing to Bluey here, there's not much cleverness or cuteness present in Chipchilla's tales of learning about teamwork, sportsmanship, and basic problem solving. It's a knockoff Bluey in the sense that somebody wanted to make something like Bluey, but never understood the appeal beyond just, moral lessons taught by anthropomorphic animals. Another exclusive show to Bentkey was A Wonderful Day with Mabel McClay. And this plays like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, produced by someone who never understood Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It's a gentle show about Mabel McClay finding fun stuff to do around her house, with occasional detours of cartoons and musical numbers. The show is certainly calm in its presentation, and sure, Mr. Rogers was also calm and kind in the same way that Mabel is here, but Mr. Rogers was also honest. Part of the comfort with Fred Rogers was that you, as a viewer, felt like you could talk to him about anything. He didn't shy away from topics like bigotry or death. He'd address these subjects in a comfortable environment where it felt like you were being a part of a conversation with an adult in which your feelings mattered. If you watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and the only aspect you took away from it was the calmness and the kindness, you only grasped a fraction of what made Fred Rogers so appealing. Mr. Rogers wasn't afraid to tackle racism, a topic that I think Mabel is too docile to handle with her crocheted kid gloves. And I know this might seem mean that I'm comparing Bentkey's programming to kid show titans like Bluey and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, but this is the realm that the Daily Wire chose to enter. They've spent millions of dollars trying to develop their own streaming platform, and if you spend that much money and the best that you can come up with is a bland version of Bluey and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on tranquilizers, you might have fucked up. The other shows on Bentkey are not much better, like Gus Plus Us is a lukewarm and slow-paced puppet show that seems to take place in a white void. Kid Fit Go is a kid-hosted exercise video series that you could find on YouTube for free, and then there's Kid Explorer, a kid-hosted educational program on history that you could probably find something similar to on YouTube for free. Actually, no, I'm sorry, I need to change that. What I said was wrong there. You can literally find Kid Explorer videos on YouTube for free. Bentkey basically just paid for a YouTube channel to host YouTube videos on their streaming platform. They also paid for some additional shows to beef up their streaming service so that the catalog didn't look so scarce. The TV shows they bought are not that impressive, since they've aired elsewhere previously. Clangers is a stop-motion British show about weird creatures on the moon, and you can watch these episodes elsewhere. The Canterville Ghost is a decently produced miniseries, but it has already aired on the Mormon BYU TV. These aren't exactly impressive licenses, considering that these are small shows from niche markets that have previously aired for their small audience. But you know what, I'll be fair here. Ben-Key did acquire one noteworthy cartoon. They managed to get the rights to G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, the original 1980s cartoon. And you know what? I grew up with this cartoon and I love it, so this is a pretty good get, except for the fact that you can watch this cartoon elsewhere, like on Tubi, for free. But hey, at least there are some choices in streaming classic cartoons. Like, you can either pay money to watch G.I. Joe on a streaming service with a very limited selection, or pay nothing. The choice is yours, but be aware that one of these choices is very dumb. Also, let's be real here. If you're a parent, your kids are not going to watch this old-ass cartoon. You're going to watch this show. You're going to watch G.I. Joe alone by yourself, crying into your cereal bowl as you pine for your childhood where you didn't obsess over media that was woke. But in terms of a more recent and notable cartoon, Ben-Key also has Lego Friends Girls on a Mission. And okay, you know what? At least this one only airs on Netflix. So Ben-Key managed to steal away one show from an expensive streaming service. So yeah, this is kind of a win for them. It's a small win, but hey, you know what? We can give this to them. Unfortunately, we can't, because you see, I lied. Lego Friends can be watched on Pluto TV for free. The Daily Wire is so bad at buying streaming rights that their two big brand shows on Ben-Key can be watched elsewhere for free. Okay, but maybe they'll have success with their next acquired show, which is nothing. There's nothing left on Ben-Key. And like, this is it? This is your answer to Disney Plus? Yeah, come on over to Ben-Key where you can watch boring Bluey, comatose Mr. Rogers, and cartoons you've already seen on platforms that you paid nothing for. Really? This is it? This is going to shake the foundation of the liberal streaming market? I'm sorry, but Ben-Key just sucks. Your children are going to hate this if this is all they get to watch on Saturday morning. And that's to say nothing of the app's functionality, which apparently breaks on several devices like Chromecast. I mean, that's the common problem I've seen in the user reviews, in addition to tech support doing nothing, and getting a refund just sounds like a fucking nightmare for this service. Okay, so Ben-Key needed something major to save their service, and that something is a movie. They saw that Disney was making a version of Snow White with an actress who wasn't white. So Daily Wire decided to make their own version of Snow White, with an extra H in white. So the Daily Wire set to work on this film, and Ben-Key posted a teaser for the film starring their own Brett Cooper, a youthful commentator for the Daily Wire. This project could be the make or break moment for Ben-Key and Daily Wire Plus. If they could make an alternative to Disney's retooling of a classic fairy tale, you know what? Ben-Key could have a shot at shaking up the streaming market for children's entertainment. Unfortunately, this film is probably never going to be finished. Why? Because Brett Cooper is no longer at the Daily Wire. Uh-oh. Also, Jeremy Boring stepped down as CEO. Uh-oh. And the entire Ben-Key staff was sacked. Oh, fuck! Part 4, The Epitaph. As of this recording, Daily Wire Plus is currently in the crash and burn stage, and it's glorious. It's not like this was too much of a surprise either. Right-wing media influence has been drying up over the past few years for one reason or another. Steven Crowder was abandoned en masse after it was revealed that he was abusive to his pregnant wife. Tim Pool was caught taking money from the Russian government for continuing to churn out right-wing propaganda. And the quartering is just bad with money. All of these right-wing conservative figures are now struggling to maintain a foothold in online culture. Because it's a funny thing spewing right-wing propaganda based on lies. Eventually people wise up to your tactics, realize you're a piece of shit swindler, and abandon all support. And now that a lot of conservatives who voted for Donald Trump in 2024 are coming to the shocking revelation that he was never going to help them, they're also starting to realize that the media sources they previously trusted were lying to them. So the well is pretty much drying up for these conservative grifters. They might have to settle for only 2 dolls this year. Now, whatever is going on internally at the Daily Wire, it can't be good. Brett Cooper left the Daily Wire, which doesn't bode well for the Snow White movie, which will probably have to start production all over again since she was supposed to be the lead, and she also had a role in the Pendragon cycle, but they can probably just edit around her, I think. Remember Gina Carano? Well, she regrets the bridges that she's burned. Initially, she was happy with moving to the Daily Wire, but that seems to have changed. Her tone seemed to change from, I don't care about Disney, they can fire me, I can just work at the Daily Wire, to, wait, no, Disney can't fire me, I'm suing. I think she really does want to be taken back after starring in 2 abysmal conservative movies. Please, Disney, let me back into the Star Wars. I don't like conservative Hollywood. It smells here. The bleeding of talent at the Daily Wire is pretty funny, but also rather predictable. The thing about right-wing fascists is that if you give them enough time, they'll eat each other. You can see how that has played out with the many enemies that the Daily Wire has made over the years from people on the right. And when someone gets fired or moves on from the Daily Wire, they make damn sure they burn that bridge with napalm. So I can safely say that the Daily Wire is probably not going to finish the Snow White movie. When they fire somebody, they wipe the slate clean. And since Brett Cooper was playing the central character of Snow White, everything that they've shot with her will have to be scrapped. And I don't know, I don't think that the Daily Wire is competent enough to pull off a Christopher Plummer and recast a la All the Money in the World. There's just nothing to look forward to in Daily Wire's future. With Ben Key gone, Chipchilla is cancelled. Mabel McClay, cancelled. Mr. Birchum, cancelled. Snow White movie, likely cancelled. The only project that might still be in the works is Jeremy's The Pendragon cycle. Let's be real here. Unless this fantasy epic is loaded with transphobic and racist jokes, it's not going to draw an audience. So things are not looking good at the Daily Wire, with so many parties having fractured from the company. But you wouldn't know that if you asked the Daily Wire. Like, when Ben Shapiro went on Megyn Kelly's podcast, he said, no, everything's fine. Quote, we are growing, we are thriving, we have extremely big moves we are looking forward to making this year. Yeah, we're not laying off people and trying to sell our struggling company. That's all just steam from the steamed hams we're going to be having. A few months later, however, Ben Shapiro attended the Milken conference to meet with investors. It sure does look like you're trying to sell the Daily Wire, Ben. Hey guys, please buy our company. We made an obnoxious anti-trans comedy and dollar store Bluey that your kids won't watch. The future is so uncertain for the Daily Wire at this point. Whatever route they go down, though, it's sure to be pretty funny as this media empire that was built on hate crumbles to the ground. Conclusion. You might have gawked at all the Daily Wire Plus junk and thought to yourself, how can conservatives like this crap? I think the best way to answer that is to address the appeal of AI filmmaking. The Chinese company called Minimax was developing generative AI to create audio and video. An Instagram user decided to test this AI with a Star Wars prompt, and the video that was spat out was this. Want a sword fight, man? Come on, I'll sword fight you, man. Let's sword fight you. Now, to AI developers and movie producers, this video looks amazing. And it's not because it's a well-told story or that the visuals look great. It's that making this sloppy video cost them nothing. They didn't have to pay 3D artists or animators or voice actors or editors to create this video. It doesn't matter that the video doesn't make sense. That's a non-business concern. They have this observation of AI being beneficial for anything that gets churned out of its predictive mess of data. And this is in sharp contrast to the rest of the world, which looked at this video and had the immediate question of, why did you have Darth Vader and Darth Maul fight each other with their lightsaber penises? Conservative cinema is the same way. It doesn't matter if their movies and TV projects are not cleverly written. It doesn't matter if their comedies are not funny. It doesn't matter if their jokes are written explicitly for the Daily Wire audience and nobody else. And it definitely doesn't matter if their media looks like shit. That's not the point. The point is, they want a seat at the table. They want to be taken as seriously as Netflix or Disney+. They want families to watch Chipchilla instead of Bluey. They want adults to watch Mr. Birchum instead of Family Guy. But nobody who isn't already deep into conservative propaganda is going to watch this crap because it's on Daily Wire Plus. Most people who know about the Daily Wire either fully buy into their conservative messaging or fully steer away from it for being so disgusting. Daily Wire Plus can't appeal to mainstream audiences as a suitable alternative because despite amassing a considerable amount of money and popularity, its appeal remains strictly conservative and niche. Part of the conservative mindset is a level of projection where you find your own worst fault and then accuse your enemy of harboring that flaw instead. It's why Jeremy Boring and Ben Shapiro continue to promote the Daily Wire Plus productions as being free of political indoctrination. The implication is that the mainstream studios put the political messaging as the key factor in what they will produce. But in truth, it's money. The primary question with big-name studios in approving most mainstream movies and television is, will this make money and will people be watching it? It's just a happy coincidence that a good chunk of the films made for profit in mainstream Hollywood tend to lean more towards the left rather than the right. The Daily Wire operates similarly, focusing on the productions that are most popular and garner the most attention. And by their admission, their biggest successes to date were the films What is a Woman?, Lady Ballers, and Am I Racist? So, the films that are pretty much just right-wing propaganda. While the primary motivation may still be what generates the most revenue for the company, the key factor is that, at this point, the only people still supporting the Daily Wire Plus are conservatives. The Daily Wire has not launched a new streaming service that has shaken up the movie industry and lured subscribers away from Disney+. They've made a conservative streaming service that is only entertaining for conservatives. And with the Daily Wire bleeding talent, cutting corners, and adhering to a political stance that is growing increasingly fascist in the second era of Donald Trump, that's a recipe for disaster. Working on Daily Wire Plus productions must be miserable for these folks. Jeremy Boring was previously a producer, but his career didn't go far. Ben Shapiro wanted to be a screenwriter, but nobody wanted to work with him. Matt Walsh was a failed radio host, and Michael Knowles was a failed actor. Their only chance to be famous now is through the Daily Wire, and that is just... It sounds so sad. Jeremy Boring wants to make movies and TV shows, but he can't, unless he makes them for a strictly conservative audience. He really seems to want to make the Pendragon cycle, but... it's a fantasy epic that's really not going to do well on a place like Daily Wire Plus. It's a streaming service that is far too grossly conservative for mainstream liberals or moderates to favor, and it's cultivated a niche-devoted audience that expects nothing less than fervently right-wing narratives. Streaming services expand their subscription numbers and reach by developing a variety of media that appeals to multiple audiences. By comparison, Daily Wire Plus has a pitifully small catalog that will only be of interest to a very particular crowd, and one that is currently dwindling as the political winds shift. And there is no shortage of conservative-friendly media out there, either through mainstream production houses like Balboa Productions or more niche venues like PureFlix. But the fact that the Daily Wire spent hundreds of millions of dollars to make a conservative streaming platform and that it's tanking fast, I think, is very funny. If you're a conservative and think that the mainstream studios are mocking your values or indoctrinating your children with undesirable philosophies, the Daily Wire is not trying to offer you a suitable alternative with apolitical entertainment. They're capitalizing on your anger, knowing that your rage will blind you enough to buy their snake oil. And you can do better than the Daily Wire Plus. Like, if you really want to watch G.I. Joe, just go watch it on Tubi. You won't have to pay for it, and you won't feel weird subscribing to a platform that gifts you leftist tear tumblers. Hey everybody, thanks for watching my video on the Daily Wire Plus to the end. If you liked it, be sure to, like it and then share it. If you'd like to support me, I have a Patreon listed below there. I'll let the rest of the credits play here while I go find something better to watch after watching all that Daily Wire crap. Man, they'd hate this one, wouldn't they?